This is the Sunshine Cathedral perspective. Is church watching a renaissance in gay literature marking a turning point for publishing? Florida banned more books in 2023 than any other state. Shocking. And more than 95% of library removal is over LGBTQ plus themes pushed by evangelical Christian organizations. But 2024 starts with some hope of a sort of renaissance in gay literature. Queer 25-year-old author Jenny Fran Davis' book, unapologetically entitled Dykette, became one of the most buzzworthy titles of 2023. Davis told NBC News, and I'm quoting, "This book really came along at a time where we're in this renaissance of gay literature. There was an immediate audience that wanted to accept it with open arms. There was a receptiveness that I didn't know would have been there 5 years before. Just the title alone would have been scarier for publishers even 5 or 10 years ago," unquote. According to industry experts, this queer renaissance started in 2019. 2023 sales of LGBTQ plus books is 7% over year by year and 200% over where it was since 2019. Compare that with all fiction books, which are down 3% a year over and 22% over the last 4 years. Christian McLean, a leading book industry analyst with Scarier, says queer fiction titles are thriving specifically because of a backdrop of record attempts to censor works by and about the LGBTQ plus community. McLean said that fiction books carrying an LGBTQ plus tag are causing record numbers. McLean notes, and I'm quoting her, "We see growth in fantasy, in general fiction, in sci-fi, and that really speaks to the richness of the story world and the fact that these things are cross-pollinating," unquote. Susie F. Garcia, editor of the LGBTQ plus nonprofit Lambada Literary, explains even bookstore aisles are starting to look different because of the way queer themes are appearing in a variety of texts. She said, "As access to these kinds of books has grown, we're seeing more nuances come forward." She continues saying, "So it's not just an LGBTQ shelf in a bookstore anymore. They're taking up room on every shelf." In other words, as the libraries censor, in-store and online bookstores are booming for LGBTQ books. TikTok and a corner there called Book Talk are also hugely driving queer experiences. The impacts of this new literary trend contrast traditional churches. Romance literature with LGBTQ plus themes is growing fast despite evangelical rejection. Booksellers like Leah Koch, co-owner of the bi-coastal bookstore The Ripped Bodice, says people age into romance genre every year, but this happened a lot more rapidly. All of them just joined at once, basically. She goes on and says, "It's a new generation's form of a big book club." Literary success of LGBT themes flies directly in the face of traditional anti-LGBTQ plus Christian messages. And that growth is accelerating. Kendall Story, editor-in-chief at Catapult, noted, and I'm quoting again, "Almost half of Catapult's 10 bestsellers from last year were LGBTQ titles, up from just 1 in 2021. Well, that story kind of tells a lot about what's going on in the book world, and I think that there's a reason that stuff like this happens. When there's a backlash against any group of people, we look for something. We look for a safe haven, and books are always, or have always been for me, that safe haven that allows us to grow and to see that we're not alone. I'm going to share a story with you about little old Kevin. When I grew up, there was nothing that I wouldn't read. I was a voracious reader. If it was in the house, I read it, and my mother knew this. So she was a single mother of 2 boys and a girl. And I think maybe sometimes she didn't know quite how to say things. So she would leave books out for me to read, knowing that I would pick them up and start reading them. I kind of learned about where babies came from that way. And strangely enough, I do believe that a parent who is in tune with their child knows who their child is at a very young age. And my mother was truly in tune to me anyway. My brother and sister will tell you, well, she loved you more. I said, no, I think I was just more out there than the 2 of you. So she left out this book one time, and it must have been written in the 50s. Now, this is the late 60s when I'm reading it. And it's about a couple, 2 guys, who meet, fall in love, and have a torrid relationship. I'm like, wow. So there are people out there who behave like I want to behave. And it's nice to know that the literature out there tells me that it's okay to be me. So for us to look at what's going on in 2019 up to 2023, it's not a surprise. Because people are looking for that validation. They're looking to see, in fiction especially, that they exist. And I love some of the TV shows that are out right now that do the same thing. But to be able to take a book, sit down, and maybe in your bed with the covers on you, with just a little light, reading about people who look and sound just like you, that for me is priceless.
Literature has always been a weapon used for resistance, a peaceful weapon of resistance. I was thinking about the Harlem Renaissance. I was thinking about the beat poets. I was thinking about Audre Lorde, and the womanist literature, and then theological movements. I mean, when you're beat down, writing and singing and speaking, and the arts are a way of lifting you up and empowering you, and sometimes getting a message out. Sometimes it's over your head, just beat you over the head with it, and sometimes it's very subtle. And you discover it midway through the play or the poem or the novel, through the character or whatever. It's like, oh, that represents something else. And but that's the way it's always been. That's what apocalyptic literature was in the Bible. It's resistance literature to oppression and injustice. So just like the Harlem Renaissance, maybe we're having a Castro Renaissance, or a Montrose Renaissance, or a Wilton Manors Renaissance, a queer Renaissance. It would only make sense. It's how history has unfolded over and over.
Here in the state of Florida, we have the Don't Say Gay. And there's a lot of that going around the country right now. So young queer people are going to find something. They are going to find something, and if they find it in books. I mean, I know that's how I discovered a lot of who I was, were the books that were written many, many years ago now. But it only makes sense that this kind of thing is going to rise in popularity. People are going to find it.
Yes.
And if it's out there and if it's selling, it's going to continue to be published.
And I just love the phrase gay queer Renaissance. I mean, I just love that we can live into that history. We've seen some of that history. And I just kind of like the idea of just reading, and if it's available to read it. Kevin, you mentioned about your mother doing books, leaving them around. I remember my mother often on the coffee table will leave, of course, that was the Holy Bible. And next to the Holy Bible was the Sears and Roebuck's catalog. And she would play this game with me. She says, okay, read this scripture and find a picture in Sears and Roebuck's that matches up with it.
Interesting.
And so there were certain scriptures she would let me, like, okay, read the Leviticus and find pictures of, and she would say, no, go to the men's section. And so I now, just thinking about that, reflecting back, like maybe she was trying to tell me something way back then, that you are in the Bible already, but you just have to find yourself in color in this book.
My gosh, you just gave me goosebumps.
It's one of those reminders about how we find ourselves in all the places, and that was a good mother-son lesson. I just remember it when you was talking about that. It kind of flashed.
You were looking at the underwear section anyway. Don't act like your mother. You were looking at that anyhow.
When there was the Jesus being baptized by John, she did go to the.
We are excited to tell you about our next adventure with our Global Fellowship. In 2024, this year, we'll be going where the hills are alive as we explore Austria and Alpine Europe for Gay Oktoberfest. Space is extremely limited, so make sure to go to happeningout.travel/sunshine to reserve your space now.